What if I told you that the pain you've been carrying since childhood is not a punishment? What if I told you that this pain is, in fact, a quiet calling from your soul, a deep invitation to look within, to break free, to finally return to wholeness? Most people spend their entire lives running from their own shadow. They numb it, distract themselves from it, bury it under busy schedules and hardened hearts. But what they fail to realize is that within that shadow lives the deepest healing. Today, you're going to discover how the teachings of Carl Jung can transform your oldest wounds into real emotional strength. If you've ever felt invisible, misunderstood, exhausted from carrying the weight of a story no one else sees, but that you feel every single day, then this video was made for you, because there are wounds that don't bleed, but they shape our lives. Invisible scars, wounds that quietly influence everything: how you love, how you trust, how you respond to even the smallest. Rejections. They surface in moments when you feel ignored, abandoned, compared, or belittled, even though you're now an adult. Many of those wounds were born before you even had the words to name them, when you looked at the world through innocent eyes, believing the adults around you knew what they were doing, and what they did or didn't do, you recorded. Not in words, but in your body, your heart, your soul. This video is an invitation to revisit those forgotten parts of yourself. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in depth psychology, dedicated his life to exploring the roots of human behavior. He wasn't interested in surface-level fixes. He dove deep, and what he found was powerful. Who you are today isn't just the result of your conscious decisions, it's also the reflection of the child you once were. That child still lives inside you, and they haven't forgotten. What was missing? What hurt? What was silenced, swallowed, dismissed? All of it still lives within you, quietly, waiting to be seen, to be heard, to be honored. So stay with me through the end of this journey, because you're not just going to understand why you struggle to trust or why you feel guilty in moments of joy. You're going to learn how to transform those wounds, not with cliches, not with superficial self-help, but through the deep wisdom of Carl Jung, used as a compass to guide you from awareness to transformation. And here's something you need to understand right now. You are not broken. You are wounded, and that changes everything. To be broken implies you're beyond repair, that there's no value left. But to be wounded means healing is still possible, that something within you doesn't need to be discarded. It needs to be embraced. And healing, as Jung taught us, doesn't mean erasing the past. It means returning to it, but this time with tools, with maturity, with presence. It means rescuing the part of you that got trapped in abandonment, confusion, shame, or rage. Have you ever wondered why your reactions sometimes feel disproportionate? Why, when someone pulls away, you feel panic? Or why, when you're ignored, a nameless sadness swallows you whole? Jung once said, "Within each adult is a child who was wounded and who still remembers." That child, though forgotten by your rational mind, still lives in your emotional body, still waits for you, not to be judged, but to be held. Because everything that remains unacknowledged gets repeated. Many of the struggles you face today, in your relationships, in your self-esteem, in your patterns of self-sabotage, aren't personal failures. They are echoes of unhealed wounds. Fragments of a story you never got the chance to complete. But that begins to change today. In the next segments of this video, I'll guide you on a journey of deep inner reconnection. We're going to explore, through Jung's lens, the 5 most common emotional wounds born in childhood: abandonment, betrayal, humiliation, injustice, suppression of your individuality, You'll learn how to name these wounds, to give them shape and, most importantly, meaning, because Jung believed that the unconscious holds the keys to our healing, and that by bringing to light what was once hidden, you can reclaim the power you once gave away, out of fear, out of need, or just to survive. Yes, childhood may have been the birthplace of your deepest shadows, but it can also be the place where you rediscover your light. And don't assume that you had to go through something extreme to be wounded. Sometimes the wound forms in silence. A mother who was physically present, but emotionally absent. A father who provided financially, but withheld affection. A family that never yelled, but never really listened. Wounds don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper, through absence, through indifference, through disconnection. But here's the good news. They can be transformed. And that's what this video is here to teach you. Not as a miracle, not as a magic pill, but as a real, honest, deeply human process. To heal is to return to the origin with reverence, with love, with compassion. And if you choose to take this step, to look within with courage and truth, you won't just free your present, you'll protect your future from repeating the pain you were never meant to carry in the first place. Because the truth is, no one ever taught us how to heal. They only taught us how to cope, to pretend we're strong, to wear smiles over our scars. But as Jung reminded us, what we do not face within ourselves, we will meet again as fate. You don't have to keep living from the wound. You are worthy of living from freedom. This video is more than information. It's a safe space. It's a whisper to your soul. Here, you're not overreacting. You're not being weak. You're not dwelling on the past. You're doing what few have the courage to do. You're choosing to heal. So take a deep breath. Be gentle with yourself. And give yourself permission. Because maybe, just maybe, this journey you're beginning right now is the beginning of your deepest liberation. Here's a truth that may sound harsh, but in the end, it's liberating. Healing your emotional wounds is your responsibility. And yes, I know. At first, that might feel unfair, because you didn't choose the pain you went through, did you? You didn't choose to grow up in the silence of emotional absence, in rejection, in chaos, or under the weight of never feeling quite enough. But here's the essential point. As long as you keep blaming others for your pain, you continue giving them your power. And that is exactly why this video exists. Not to minimize what happened to you, not to tell you to just get over it, but to help you reclaim your power deeply, wisely, and practically. Carl Jung, the giant of depth psychology, once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." In other words, awakening, healing, evolving. It hurts. But he also said something equally important. Unnecessary suffering fades the moment you stop resisting and begin integrating. So today, here, together, we stop resisting. We stop pretending the past didn't happen. We stop pushing it beneath the rug of distraction. Today, we shine light on the places that still hurt. And in that simple but profound act of recognition, you begin walking a different path, one that's lighter, stronger, more you. This video doesn't claim to have all the answers. What it does have, though, is the right questions. Questions that invite you to reflect with honesty, to speak with the version of you who was left behind, to give yourself permission to cry if you need to, and to celebrate when you finally recognize yourself again. Maybe for the first time in years. Because that reconnection with who you truly are is worth more than any outer accomplishment, because only when you see yourself clearly can you live with authenticity. So, I invite you to do something right now. Don't Just listen to this video with your mind. Listen with your soul. Don't rush to understand everything. Don't try to control every emotion that surfaces. Just stay, feel, breathe. Allow yourself to hear the story you forgot you needed to tell, because that story, your story, deserves to be heard, even if only by you. The words you're hearing right now are not meant to assign blame. They're not here to trap you in victimhood. They're not here to make you feel weak. They're here to remind you of something powerful. True healing begins with emotional responsibility, and that changes everything. Because once you understand why you react the way you do, once you connect the dots between your past and your present, you uncover something incredibly precious. You can choose differently, and that moment right there is the birth of your freedom. Jung left us with a crucial insight. What we do not make conscious will appear in our lives as fate. In other words, what you don't heal, you repeat. And if you don't repeat it in yourself, you might pass it down to your children, to your partners, to the people you love the most. That's how deep this process goes. It's not just for you, it's for those around you. It's for every version of yourself still waiting for peace. It's for a lighter life, not just yours, but also of those who walk beside you. Yes, turning inward might hurt, but do not fear that pain, because the pain that heals is different from the pain that destroys. One poisons, the other purifies. And here, with Unshakable Mind, we're in this together, to walk through that pain, not with shame, but with love, with awareness, with compassion. This isn't about reopening wounds just to feel more. This is about cleaning them with dignity, about embracing the parts of you that were once silenced, about finally saying to yourself, I'm done surviving, I want to truly live. And maybe, when you look back with new eyes, when you revisit certain memories, not as the scared child, but as the aware adult, you'll be able to say with quiet certainty, I'm healed, because now you understand. Healing your inner child doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, with presence, with clarity, with courage. It means whispering to that part of you that waited in the dark for so long. You're not alone anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Maybe right now you're thinking, but how could something so small really change my life? Let me tell you, something tending to your inner child can change everything, because when the child inside you finally feels seen, heard, and embraced, the adult you've become can finally rest. Yes, rest. From the pressure of being strong all the time, from the exhausting need for approval, from the quiet panic of abandonment, the unexplained anger, the constant anxiety that never seems to go away. By the end of this video, if you allow it, you won't just understand how to heal childhood wounds. You'll learn how to honor what you lived through without letting it define you. You'll learn how to free yourself without forgetting, how to forgive without excusing, and how to rebuild without losing your essence. Carl Jung gave us a key. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That quote, it's not just a line, it's a compass. Because many of the choices you make today, many of the relationships you fall into, the habits you repeat and don't even understand why, they're not really you. They're the echoes of parts inside you still acting from the darkness of the unconscious. Parts that were never acknowledged, parts that are still bleeding silently. And that's why true healing begins with one thing, courage. The courage to look at what hurts. Let's begin with the first wound, abandonment. This pain doesn't always come from someone physically leaving. Sometimes it's the emptiness of a mother who was always present, but never emotionally available, the coldness of a father who provided food but not affection. Jung taught us that a child who isn't seen for who they are grows up believing they must earn love. And that silent belief turns into emotional dependency. You chase love at any cost. You accept crumbs. You tolerate the intolerable because deep down, a voice whispers, you have to prove you're lovable. Take a moment, close your eyes, try to remember a moment in your childhood where you needed comfort and didn't receive it. How old were you? Where were you? What did you wish you could say? Now gently open your eyes and write this sentence. Today I recognize that I needed, and finish it. That single sentence can open the door to the child inside. And finally, let them speak. The second wound, humiliation. It comes when you were made to feel small, when they laughed at your tears, when they told you feeling was too much, when they mocked your sensitivity, when vulnerability became a punchline. Jung once said, "The soul suffers when it is forced to deny its own nature. Every time you were told to suck it up, every time you were shamed for needing care, a piece of your soul cracked. Healing this wound means reclaiming your dignity, the dignity that was stolen before you even knew what the word meant." The third wound, betrayal. It's born when someone you trusted, someone who should have protected you, broke that trust. Maybe it was a promise they never kept, maybe a secret they exposed, or maybe they left you alone at the very moment you needed them the most. A child who experiences betrayal learns one thing: never trust. So they build armor. Control everything, question everyone, trust no one. And as an adult, this becomes fear of love, fear of surrender, fear of needing anyone. If you remember a promise someone broke, write a letter, not to them, but to you. Write it from the voice of your 5-year-old self. Don't overthink it. Just write. And when you're done, read it out loud. And if tears come, let them. Because that letter is your way of saying, what I went through was real. The fourth wound, injustice. This one forms in cold, rigid households, places where mistakes were sins, where play was foolishness, where love was conditional, where rules mattered more than emotions. Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that darkness often begins in childhood, when you're told not to be you, when joy, creativity, affection are all shoved aside so you can fit into a mold that was never made for you. Sometimes there's no one moment, just a long silence, 1,000 unsaid things, a million hugs that never came. Jung believed in the divine child, the creative, intuitive spark inside every human being. But when that child is ignored, it doesn't die, it buries itself. And we grow into adults who smile on the outside and mourn on the inside. Want to do something powerful right now? Take a photo of yourself as a child. Look into their eyes for a few quiet minutes, then write, "Today I promise you." Finish that promise with whatever you most needed back then: respect, time, patience, love. That right there is a sacred pact. And sacred pacts heal what others once broke. Finally, the fifth wound, the denial of individuality. Jung believed deeply in individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. But for many of us, that path was blocked. We were silent, shamed, pressed into roles that didn't fit, taught that being different was wrong, that dreaming big was naive, that expressing who we were was embarrassing. So we adapted. We became what they wanted. And somewhere along the way, we lost shape. Now ask yourself this: what did I love to do as a child and gave up just to be accepted? Drawing, imagining stories, creating magical worlds with toys, dancing like no one was watching. Those parts of you didn't die. They're just asleep. And Jung reminds us healing doesn't mean erasing the past, it means redefining it. Close your eyes, picture an empty room, and in that room, see the child you once were. They're sitting, waiting. Walk toward them, sit beside them, and just B. Don't speak yet. Your presence, your full, loving presence, is enough for now. In the next part of this video, we'll explore what that child is still longing for, and how reconnecting with them might just be the start of your true healing journey. There's a powerful idea introduced by Donald Winnicott, one of the most influential figures in developmental psychology, that we need to truly absorb. A child doesn't need a perfect mother. She needs a good enough mother. At first glance, it may sound simple, but those words carry an enormous weight. They remind us that emotional wounds don't only arise from grand traumas or obvious abuse. Sometimes they're born from something far more subtle, repeated absences, connections that never truly happened, silences that screamed louder than words, physical presence without emotional availability, a childhood that looked peaceful on the outside but felt empty on the inside. And that's why so many people carry a quiet guilt around their pain. They say things like, "But my parents never hit me. I never went hungry. My childhood was normal. So why does it still hurt so much?" Carl Jung would answer with something profound. It's not what happened that matters. It's how your soul interpreted it. You see, emotional pain isn't logical. It's symbolic, subjective, silent. It's often born not from what was done, but from what was missing. Not from the loud moments, but from the 1,000 tiny moments of disconnect. And it's on that quiet terrain, often invisible to others, yet deeply real to you, that the true work of healing begins. Jung called this the process of individuation. It's the journey of shedding who the world told you to be, so you can become who you really are. But here's the truth most people miss. You can't build a whole self on top of fractured pieces. No authentic identity can stand strong if parts of your soul remain wounded and unseen. The real adult is not born from forgetting pain, but from listening to it, understanding it, transforming it into wisdom. And one of the most transformative moments in the healing journey is when you finally release the need to blame. When you stop chasing villains, when you stop waiting for apologies that may never come, and you realize it's no longer about what they did, it's about what you choose to do now. Jung said it clearly. Guilt is not transformative, but responsibility is. That one shift from guilt to responsibility changes everything. You stop living from your wounds and start living from your choices. Because healing doesn't mean justifying the past. It means being free from it, so you can build a new future on your own terms. But there's one wound that often hides in plain sight. One that's harder to see, but no less powerful. It's the pain of those who always say, "I'm fine." The pain of those who were forced to grow up too soon, who became the strong one, the dependable one, the self-sufficient one, but inside still carry a tired child who just wanted someone to hold them, to protect them, to say, "You don't have to carry it all." Jung called this phenomenon the inflation of the ego, where an appearance of strength hides a deep, unmet need. And what happens when that mask of strength never gets addressed? It cracks. Softenings begin to show, often in relationships, in loneliness, in unexplained anxiety, in emotional burnout. So how do we start healing that rigid exterior? With something radically simple, but deeply uncomfortable. Stand in front of the mirror, look into your own eyes, and say aloud every morning, "I don't have to prove anything to be worthy of love." At first it might feel strange. You'll resist. You might laugh, feel embarrassed. You might hear a voice say, "This is stupid," but keep going, because your subconscious is listening, and that old program that told you you only deserve love if you're perfect, strong, useful, invulnerable, needs to be rewritten. Jung was a visionary because he saw the human being as a complete system, not just body and mind, but emotion, soul, dream, symbol, and shadow. Everything is part of the psyche, and everything is communicating with you. Everything deserves to be acknowledged, to be felt, to be integrated. So, healing your inner child is not just an intellectual exercise. It's not just about naming what happened. It's about re-entering the forgotten rooms of your soul. It's about re-inhabiting yourself. It means playing again, crying when needed, saying what was silenced, feeling what you once feared, and reclaiming the parts of you that were left behind just so you could survive. And the best part? It's never too late. Whether you're 25 or 75, your inner child is still with you, still waiting, still calling. And if they don't feel heard, they'll show up through repeating toxic relationships, a constant sense of emptiness, irrational fear of being abandoned, anxiety that seems to come from nowhere. But if you choose to listen, if you choose to extend your hand and say, "I see you now," everything starts to shift. Jung once said that dreams are the language of the soul. Have you ever dreamed of lost children, old houses, blocked paths? What if those weren't just dreams? What if they were messages, fragments of a voice long buried? What if the child you were is still trying to reach you through symbols, images, color, silence? So instead of analyzing, just create, draw, write, paint, without judgment, without goals. Just listen with your hands. Because your inner child may not speak in words. They speak in moments, in symbols, in raw feeling. When was the last time you created something just for yourself? Not to be good at it, not to impress anyone, but to feel free. Healing isn't always about remembering the wound. It's about recognizing who you became because of it, and choosing to no longer be that person. Jung said it best. To know yourself is to accept that you are both light and shadow. Healing doesn't mean becoming someone better. It means embracing who you already are, including the parts you've tried to hide. You don't have to keep living the story someone else wrote. You can write a new one. But first, you must go back, not to dwell, not to suffer again, but to reclaim what got left behind, your softness, your wildness, your honesty, your capacity to love without fear, your truth. Because when your inner child is healed, the adult version of you begins to bloom, and life stops being survival and starts becoming presence. There's a truth most people have yet to fully understand about healing. It's not just about understanding everything with your mind. It's about learning how to trust again, trusting yourself. Right here. Right now, because childhood wounds don't live only in your memories, they live in your body, in the tension in your shoulders you can't explain, in the chronic pain the doctors can't diagnose, in the insomnia that returns night after night, in the gut issues, the fatigue, the anxiety that no test can fully capture. These are not random. They're messages. They're your unconscious speaking through the only voice it has left, your body. Carl Jung was one of the first to say this out loud. The unconscious doesn't just appear in dreams. It shows up in the body, in the emotions, in the symptoms. That's why real healing isn't just psychological. It's physical, it's energetic, it's symbolic. Because the body doesn't lie. It holds everything, and it remembers, even when you don't. How many times have you reacted to something small as if your life was in danger? Your heart races, your stomach tightens, your throat closes up, and you feel this wave of panic without knowing why. It's not just overreacting. It's your inner child whispering, "Be careful, we've been hurt like this before." Even your most rational adult choices, the job you pursue, the way you handle money, the kind of relationships you attract, how you structure your day, might still be shaped by the child inside you. And when decisions come from the wound, they come from fear. But when decisions come from integration, they're built on essence, not on emptiness. There's one wound few people talk about, but many carry: the wound of not being heard. Maybe as a child your ideas were dismissed, your questions interrupted, your feelings ignored, and you grew up carrying a quiet, devastating belief: what I think doesn't matter. In adulthood, that wound shows up as fear of speaking up, insecurity about your opinions, over-explaining everything you do, struggling to believe in your own worth. Jung called this the castration of authentic thought, one of the most dangerous wounds to the human soul. And the most subtle part, many adults today repeat inside their own heads the voices of the parents who once silenced them: a critical voice, a perfectionist voice, a demanding voice, one that corrects everything, never praises, never rests. That voice, once external, has now become internal. And so what many people truly need isn't more motivation. It's a new voice, a gentler tone, a softer dialogue, one that replaces the judge with a protector. Jung said the ego doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be educated, and that re-education begins with how you speak to yourself. Now there's something else we need to talk about, something that seems small, but is actually sacred: play. Yes, play. When a child is deprived of play, when everything becomes duty, fear, performance, they grow up believing that rest is dangerous, that smiling is wasting time, that being light is being weak, and that child becomes an adult who can't relax, can't enjoy, can't just be. Jung believed play was a direct portal to the unconscious, a pure expression of soul. It's where the shadow dances without fear of censorship from the mind. So when you draw without judging yourself, paint without chasing perfection, write without structure, you're doing something profound. You're externalizing the inner world, and what takes form on the outside loses power on the inside. That is emotional alchemy, turning pain into expression, turning shadow into light, turning silence into voice. Some people feel guilty for having wounds. They think, but my parents were kind. Why does it still hurt? Jung helps us understand no one escapes the wound, because no one escapes the process of becoming whole. Even the most loving homes leave gaps, not out of malice, but because being human is being imperfect. The wound doesn't always need a villain, but it always requires the one who carries it to take responsibility. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of failure. These aren't signs of weakness. They're human. We all feel them. What changes is how we relate to them. Jung said, courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to act in spite of it. Healing doesn't make you invincible. It makes you real. Suppressed memories don't always return as flashbacks. Sometimes they come back as patterns, as blocks, as intense emotions that make no sense in the moment. The unconscious doesn't forget. It waits for the moment you're ready to finally remember. And if right now you're feeling things you can't explain, maybe it's your soul asking, please look at what you've been avoiding for too long. For Jung, spirituality wasn't about religion, it was about meaning. Because when a person starts healing, they go through a rebirth, a new way of seeing, a new kind of peace. The soul doesn't just seek comfort, it seeks meaning. Giving meaning to pain, to your past, to your very existence, is one of the most powerful forms of healing. At the center of every wound, there's an unanswered question: am I enough? And we spend years trying to answer it by overworking, losing ourselves in relationships, avoiding rejection at all costs, chasing endless approval. But that answer never comes from outside. Only when you face yourself fully, with your light and shadow, can you say with quiet truth, I am enough, because I accept all of me. There is something incredibly sacred about crying for what you never received. That's not weakness. That's conscious surrender. Jung believed tears were a cleansing of the soul. Because what is wept out is released, and what is released creates space. So don't hold back your tears. They are water for your emotional roots, and with that water, you grow. As you look inward, with compassion, you begin to understand others more deeply. You realize we're all carrying something, and true empathy is born from self-awareness. Jung said, "What we don't accept in ourselves, we project onto others." But when you begin to embrace yourself, you stop seeing enemies and start seeing mirrors. One of the clearest signs that healing is happening is when you stop looking for someone to blame. It no longer matters who hurt you. What matters is who holds the power now, and that power is yours. Your past doesn't have to change for you to heal. You just need to change the way you carry it. And that shift alone, that inner shift, is emotional freedom. So here's a question for you. If you could say one sentence to the child you once were, what would it be? Take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment, feel it, and say it out loud, or write it down, or post it in the comments. Let that voice become the guiding star of your adult soul. Because Jung once said, "The soul heals when the adult becomes the protector the child once needed." And that choice is in your hands, right here, right now. And in the next chapter, we'll continue this journey. Deeper still, there is a quiet but immense strength in the one who can look at their own story and say with trembling but steady voice, "Yes, I've been hurt. Yes, sometimes I fall. But I'm still here, still breathing, still learning, still rewriting the story, word by word, with hands that may shake, but a heart that refuses to give up." And that is more powerful than any external achievement. Carl Jung believed that within each of us lies a core wound, a fracture in the soul that formed the moment we stopped being who we truly were, free, spontaneous, authentic, and started becoming who the world needed us to be. That fracture runs deep, and without even realizing it, we stop listening to our inner voice and begin to live out a borrowed identity. But healing, Jung reminds us, is not about becoming a child again. It's about turning inward and telling that child who still lives within, "You can speak again. I'm here now, and I'm listening." It's not about fixing. It's about finally hearing what they were never allowed to say. Do you remember a moment in your childhood when you weren't allowed to be yourself? A time when your truth was punished, mocked, or silenced? Maybe it was a comment about what you wore, a laugh when you cried, or a reprimand when you dared to dream too big. Those moments didn't just vanish. They stayed. They live within you, quietly influencing the way you express yourself, how you connect with others, how much of yourself you dare to show. Jung would tell us this. Until that moment is seen, truly seen, it will keep shaping you from the shadows. If any of this resonates with you, take a moment, right now, and write these words. Today, I choose to express myself freely. That declaration might seem small, but it's symbolic. And Jung believed deeply in the healing power of symbols. He taught us that the soul does not heal through logic. It heals through imagery, through ritual, through metaphor, through the quiet personal ceremonies of the heart. This is why some emotional blocks won't vanish with advice. They dissolve when you draw the house you grew up in, when you write a letter to your 5-year-old self, when you light a candle in silence and finally listen to the voice you were told to silence. Don't underestimate the power of your personal symbols. Healing doesn't always happen in words. It lives in the in-between, in the unspoken, in the movement of your hand, in the stillness of a memory, in the meanings only your soul understands, because often what you live through wasn't recorded in language, but your body remembered, your soul kept the score, and the unconscious, as Jung taught us, doesn't forget. It waits. One of the deepest, quietest wounds we carry is the wound of the child who believed it was their job to save their parents. How many times did you watch your mother cry, or see your father spiral into anger, and in the middle of that emotional storm, you, so small, believed it was your job to make everything okay? Jung explained that many adults today are still carrying the burden of being emotional mediators for their caregivers. They took on a role they were never meant to play: protector, fixer, emotional caretaker. That wound has a name: the silent sacrifice, and it still lives inside you. If you feel like you must always be strong, if you never allow yourself to fail, if you carry the pain of others as if it were your own. But healing this wound begins with a powerful truth: I'm no longer responsible for other people's pain. Say it as many times as you need to. Write it, feel it, declare it. And if this resonates with you, comment right now: today, I release the weight that was never mine. That might be the most radical act of self-love you ever take, because letting go of what was never yours is not selfish. It's liberation. It's emotional justice. Jung once said, the meeting with oneself is the most solitary but also the most enriching of all experiences. And he knew, because to truly meet yourself requires that you stop running, that you take off the masks, that you face the mirror and whisper, I am all of this and I still deserve love. True healing isn't about what others did for you. It's about what you choose to do for yourself now. It's time to come home, not to a house of bricks and walls, but to the house of your soul. And in the next chapter, we'll walk further into that home, with Jung as our guide and you as the protagonist of your own becoming. There's a phrase that quietly echoes for those walking the path of healing. Not everyone will understand what you're doing, but that doesn't matter. Some will laugh, others will judge, many simply won't comprehend. But you're not here to please anyone. You're here to heal. And this journey, even if solitary at times, makes you free, authentic, brave. You are not alone. This community, this space, this video are gateways, mirrors, sanctuaries. Carl Jung taught us something transformative: the sacred process of individuation. It's the path where a human being begins to shed masks, abandoned roles, unconscious repetitions, and gradually integrates their full inner self. It's not a destination, it's a journey. And healing childhood wounds is the first door on this path. When you start seeing your wounds not as curses, but as portals to your essence, something within you shifts. You stop running and begin to truly listen, with compassion, with courage, with patience. That's when the soul awakens. Many still believe looking inward is selfish, that turning to yourself is a waste of time amid the demands of the world. But Jung said clearly, nothing outside you can offer what you haven't yet given yourself. As long as childhood wounds remain open, you'll keep projecting your pain onto others. Demand what you never received, expect understanding without ever having understood yourself. But when you reconcile with your story, you become a source of peace for the world around you. If this touched your heart, write with intention: healing my childhood is the most generous act I can do for myself and those around me. Know this: many of the decisions you make today are guided by an unconscious part of you, still trying to protect you from past pain. Jung called this part the guardian of the threshold. It's that inner saboteur that stops you from trusting, from surrendering, from relaxing, from loving. But this guardian isn't the villain. It's an old version of you that hasn't realized you're safe now. Talk to it, with respect, with love. Write, thank you for protecting me. Now I take control. This simple act can transform your journey. Jung believed everyone carries within an internal map of healing. That map isn't found in books, nor in ready-made formulas. It lives in your dreams, in your pain, In moments you try to forget, but that keep returning, because they want to show you something essential. Healing childhood means following this map, one step at a time. You don't need to understand it all now. You only need to take the next step. And if you're here reading this, you've already begun. Now comment with presence. I follow the map of my soul toward healing. Breathe deeply. Feel with your heart. You are not broken. You are rebuilding. You are awakening. You are choosing a path few dare to walk, and that then makes you extraordinary. Jung said, only when we hit rock bottom do we begin to discover the gold hidden in our shadow. If today you are crying, if memories are rising to the surface, if pain is stirring inside you, you're not losing yourself, you're finding yourself again. There comes a moment in life when, without knowing how, you realize nothing outside makes sense if what's inside remains in ruins. This is true awakening. The moment you understand it's no longer about changing the world, nor others, but about rebuilding your relationship with yourself from the root. Jung knew there is nothing more powerful than someone who healed their past and decided to walk forward from their whole inner self, because when the inner child is denied, silenced, left behind, the adult born from that wound grows without a solid identity, shaped by fear of rejection, adapting to be accepted, annulling themselves to belong. Erik Erikson, psychologist and human development theorist, taught us, if in childhood we don't build security, love and trust, our later stages rise on fragile foundations. Healing, then, isn't going backward. It's reinforcing the foundations, supporting the adult with awareness and presence. John Bowlby, creator of attachment theory, showed that when caregivers aren't emotionally consistent, the child internalizes a fear of abandonment, and so arises the anxious adult, the avoidant, the hyper-independent. Jung, in perfect harmony, would add, observe the pattern, do not punish it, integrate it, understand it, transform it. Because the past only stops hurting when you decide to listen to it with love. Children whose emotions were invalidated, even when they had a roof over their heads and food on the table, carry a void that's hard to name. Alice Miller called this the tragedy of the adopted child. A little being who, despite seeming loved, learned to care for themselves without ever truly being cared for. This often forgotten child grows up to become the adult everyone admires, except themselves. Healing, in this context, is a radical act, learning to give yourself what you never received, without guilt, without judgment, only with love. One of the most common symptoms of these childhood wounds is self-sabotage. When you're about to achieve something important, fear arises. Doubt creeps in, the urge to give up surfaces. Why? Because your unconscious still believes you don't deserve it. Jung called this part the shadow, that hidden side, full of what was denied, hurt, excluded. If you don't make peace with your shadow, it acts on its own, like an invisible puppeteer pulling your strings when you least expect it. But true, power is born when this shadow stops being your enemy and becomes your ally. Donald Winnicott shed light on this understanding, the true self and the false self. The true self is spontaneous, alive, authentic. The false self is an armor created to survive hostile emotional environments. The problem is many adults live their entire lives through this false self, relating, working, loving through it, until one day they collapse. Healing happens when you stop, breathe, and begin to reclaim what is genuinely you. The inner child doesn't need complex explanations. It needs to be seen, heard, welcomed. Virginia Satir, family therapist, said essential human contact is to be seen, to be heard, and to be validated. When you start doing this for yourself, something changes. Anxiety lessens, the body relaxes, guilt dissolves. because the forgotten part of you finally feels safe. Jung left us a powerful idea: to break and at the same time rebuild. Only those who look within truly awaken. Because looking inside is seeing it all, what you love, what you hide, what you desire, what you fear. And not everyone is ready for this journey, but you are. You are here. You are reading these words. You are allowing truth in, even if it hurts. That alone is healing. Abraham Maslow, with his famous hierarchy of needs, placed at its base security, love, and belonging. But how can you reach self-actualization if these foundations are cracked, fragile? The problem is many rush to the top of the pyramid without first tending the ground they stand on. Jung would say, you can't reach the summit without first descending to your roots. Healing childhood means just that, descending to the roots and patiently cleansing them, even if the world only celebrates the fruit. Many say, this is how I am. But are they really? Or is this way just a learned protection? Are you really cold? Or did you learn not to need anyone so you wouldn't get hurt? Are you strong? Or are you exhausted from carrying everything alone so no one sees your vulnerability? Jung warned. Until you recognize the source of your defenses, you won't know who you truly are. And this process of discovery, though painful, is precisely the freedom you seek. At the heart of most wounds lies an invisible mandate. Don't be yourself. Don't feel so much. Don't speak that way. Don't laugh out loud. Don't dream. And you obeyed because you were a child, because you needed to belong. But now, as an adult, you can break this spell. You can choose to be yourself, even if everything around you trembles. As Jung said, authenticity is a form of sacred rebellion. Dreams for Jung are the most direct path to the unconscious. Healing childhood also means listening to your dreams. You appear in them lost, small, confused, being searched for by someone, perhaps your soul trying to tell you, it's time to rescue me. Write down your dreams. Read them aloud. Don't try to understand them with reason. Let them speak. To you, often it's your inner child calling from there. When we feel we have no safe place in the world, it's usually because that place was never built inside us. Jung said, the self is that sacred center to which we can always return, no matter what happens outside. Healing isn't running away from the world, it's creating an inner safe space where you can live with love, without judgment, without abandonment. The body also holds what the soul has not spoken. Jung intuited this long before psychosomatics grew. Today we know the body expresses what was never emotionally released. The stomach tightens what wasn't digested. The throat closes what was left unsaid. The skin manifests what comes from self-rejection. That's why healing childhood also means reconnecting with the body, listening to it, breathing with it, inhabiting your body with love. Viktor Frankl, creator of logotherapy, wrote, "Man can endure any how if he has a why. And that why, my friend, lives inside you." Applying all this to our wounds means something profound. We can cross through pain as long as we find a purpose. Jung fully agreed. Healing is not just relief. Healing is transformation. With purpose, your pain can become wisdom. Your former story can become service. Your wound can become a path. When the inner child feels loved by the adult you are today, life becomes lighter. Relationships stop being battlegrounds. Emotions, once enemies, turn into messengers. Mistakes become teachers. And your story, once heavy, turns into testimony. Jung would say that at this moment you've crossed a sacred threshold, the portal to your true inner life. Behind perfectionism often there is a child who only wanted approval, who believed that if they did everything right, no one would abandon them. Jung called this the dissociation of the real self. The child becomes a character to survive, and the adult lives exhausted from playing a role. Healing is allowing yourself to be imperfect, without fear, to be loved for being, not for doing. When you start giving yourself what you never received, you break an ancestral chain, and this is not only for you, it is for all the generations that came before, and for those still to come. Jung said the soul is not individual, it is connected to a collective unconscious. That's why healing childhood has a silent but powerful impact on your entire lineage. If you've come this far, it's no accident. It is your soul knocking at the door. It is your inner child saying, it's time. It's time to live differently, to breathe without fear, to love without masks, to build yourself from compassion. Carl Jung would be proud of you because you're doing the hardest work, but also the most important, reuniting with yourself. The emotional wound is not a defect to be fixed. It is a call to look within. Jung understood this with an almost spiritual depth. For him, every symptom, every fear, every failed relationship, every self-sabotage is an arrow pointing to a forgotten part of the soul. And when we dare to look where it hurts, healing begins, not from judgment, but from the light found behind fear. Behind rejection often lives the story of early detachment. Jung said, every unheard emotion becomes destiny. What does that mean? It means if you don't look at your wound, it will speak for you. When you're with someone you love, when you need to make important decisions, or when you're alone and don't know why you feel empty, it's the unresolved wound that is in charge. Repressed emotion doesn't disappear. It disguises itself in choices, in behaviors. In childhood, we didn't just learn to talk or walk, we learned to feel. And if you grew up in an environment where your emotions weren't validated, it's likely that today you have a distant or chaotic relationship with them. Jung proposed we integrate emotion as a symbol of the soul. Feeling is not a problem, it's a compass. And if you have the courage to feel, you'll start to navigate from within. One of the most powerful exercises in Jungian therapy is dialogue with inner parts. Imagine talking with your wounded child, your shadow, your protector. It's not a mental game, it's a restoration of the soul. Inside you, there are many voices. Until you speak to them, a part of you will remain ruled by broken versions that only need attention. Many people live with imposter feelings, as if they were faking adulthood, as if they had a resolved life. But that mask, that persona usually has a deep childhood root. They didn't feel emotionally supported, learned to act, to fake strength, to simulate security. Jung said the mask is necessary, but if you marry it, you get lost. Healing is removing the mask. When alone, breathing as who you truly are. In the deepest wounds, there is also the core of your strength. Jung affirmed, gold is in the shadow. And he wasn't speaking mystically, but about a real psychological process. When you enter what you fear, you discover your power. What once seemed unbearable becomes your mastery. That's why those who heal their childhood don't become weak. They become wise. It's common in adulthood to struggle with setting boundaries. If you were a child who had to behave well to avoid causing problems, that child never learned to say no because they feared losing love. But that child still lives inside the adult who allows what they don't want. Jung wouldn't just tell you to set limits. He'd tell you to observe where that difficulty comes from. Because true boundaries are built when you understand that your worth does not depend on pleasing others. There are silent but constant wounds. Like the child who grew up in a home without physical contact, where no one looked them in the eyes, where no one asked how they felt. That absence, though not abuse, leaves a subtle but powerful mark. The unconscious message that they don't deserve to be seen. Healing, in this case, is repeating 1,000 times until it becomes true. I deserve to be seen, heard, and loved. Jung did not believe in quick fixes. He knew the soul has its own rhythm, language, and depth. That's why his method does not impose. It invites, welcomes, helps you look. Sometimes healing a wound means crying what you didn't cry at 7 years old, screaming what you couldn't say at 5, hugging yourself like no one did at 3. This isn't regression, it's liberation. When you understand your wounds are not weaknesses, but doors to your authenticity, your relationship with pain changes. You no longer reject pain, you honor it, because you know every felt emotion brings you closer to who you are. Healing childhood is essentially coming home, and this home is not a physical place. It's an inner state where you no longer need to pretend to belong. Many people grew up believing their worth depended on being useful, fixing everything, behaving well, but the soul grows tired of this burden. Jung said it's necessary to return that responsibility, not out of selfishness, but out of deep self-love, because you cannot heal while carrying what is not yours. Chronic sadness, that constant sense of emptiness, can show up in many ways. Melancholy, anxiety, even addiction to stimulation. Jung invited us to see sadness as a signal from the soul that wants to be heard. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers, and if you don't listen in time, that whisper turns into pain. But if you pause and listen, it begins to speak clearly. For Jung, individuation was the process of becoming who you truly are, beyond what you were taught, beyond what was demanded of you. And that process isn't complete if you leave your inner child out, because it is the guardian of your essence, the part of you that still knows how to play, laugh, create, and love unconditionally. If you exclude it, you repeat patterns. If you integrate it, you are reborn. Behind uncontrollable anger often lies a childhood where no one heard your pain, where every time you cried, you were told to be quiet, where your needs were seen as nuisances. This repression turns into anger. It's not that you're violent, it's that you were never taught how to channel what you felt. Jung would explain, the shadow takes control when you haven't looked at it with tenderness, not to justify, but to understand and transform. A common wound is having been the emotional adult of the family while still a child, the one who mediated, comforted, organized. This child grows up feeling responsible for everything, living with anxiety and hyper-control. Jung stated, what you do excessively as an adult is often the compensation for what was missing in childhood. Healing, then, is letting go of that role, trusting and stopping trying to save everyone to finally begin taking care of yourself. Low self-esteem isn't the cause but the symptom. It's the voice of the child who was never celebrated, never recognized, never named in their greatness. Jung said, the soul blooms when it is recognized. When was the last time you said to yourself, I'm proud of me? Do it today in front of a mirror, even if you don't yet believe it. Keep repeating it, because your soul needs to hear what it never heard from anyone. Many adults live with a constant feeling of disconnection. They don't fit in, don't feel at home anywhere. This often reflects a childhood where there was no safe emotional space. Jung called this the soul's nostalgia, and the only way to fill that void is not by finding a perfect place outside, but by building that space inside, an inner sanctuary, a refuge of self-love. True forgiveness isn't justifying what was done to you. It's freeing yourself from the victim role. Jung said, forgiveness is releasing identification with the trauma, not because it didn't hurt, but because you no longer want to live from that pain. At its core, forgiveness is an act of power, decision, and rebirth, and you can do it whenever you're ready, on your own time. There are wounds that don't heal with words or explanations, but with presence, being with yourself, listening, not running away from yourself. Jung insisted the greatest act of love is to hold yourself in difficult moments. So next time you feel anguish, Don't run. Stay, breathe, place your hand on your chest and say, I am here with you. You are not alone anymore. From that moment on, something inside Elias began to change. He no longer needed to fight against the past. He could simply be present with it, welcoming it without hurry or judgment. Little by little, he realized that the wound that hurt him was not a curse, but a doorway to his true essence. The child he reconnected with in therapy was also the source of his creativity, spontaneity, and capacity to love. Elias started allowing himself small pleasures that once seemed forbidden, listening to his favorite music without guilt, laughing without fear of appearing weak, even dancing alone at home. Each simple act was a victory against years of self-demand and repression. The shadow, that part of him that once terrified him, now showed itself as a companion, a necessary energy for him to truly know himself. In the weekly sessions, his therapist encouraged him to write more letters to his inner child, to dialogue with it, to listen to its fears and desires. Don't rush, she said. Healing is a journey, not a straight line. In one of those sessions, Elias understood that the forgiveness he so long sought was not just for others, but especially for himself, for the child who survived and the adult who still feels afraid. He realized he didn't need to be perfect to deserve love or respect, nor did he have to hide his sensitivity to be strong. True strength was in recognizing his vulnerability, in saying, I'm here, to himself, even on the hardest days. It was a slow learning process, with stumbles, but each step brought him closer to his wholeness. Over time, the nostalgia he felt for the past ceased to be a sharp pain and became a gentle melody, an invitation to reconciliation. Elias understood that although the past could not be changed, he could choose how to live the present and build the future. The child who once cried alone in the bathroom was finally beginning to smile, even if timidly. Elias now knows that the journey of healing never ends. It is a constant rebirth, a dance between shadow and light, fear and courage, pain and love. But above all, he learned that the greatest revolution is coming home, inward, with patience and compassion. That phrase became his mantra. Every time he felt himself falling, he repeated it, and something inside him found its center again. Jung was right. The wound can be the place where light enters. Elias met someone. It wasn't an ideal love story, but it was different. For the first time, he didn't try to impress, didn't adapt to please, didn't hide his sensitivity. From the start, he shared that he was in a healing process. And surprisingly, the other person didn't run away. They listened, supported, and looked at him with respect. That relationship didn't complete him. It accompanied him. And that was more valuable than any fairy tale. One night, walking through Zona T, he passed by a bookstore, felt the urge to go in, grabbed a book at random. It was Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung. He opened to a page that read, Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from not being able to communicate what seems important to you. He felt a lump in his throat, bought the book, read it in a week, and knew he was on the right path. In a therapy session, his therapist said, You stopped acting like the wounded child and began becoming the adult she needed. That phrase marked him deeply. For the first time, he realized he wasn't healing just for himself, but building a new emotional path for his lineage. He began sharing his process with others, not to teach, just to relate, and discovered something powerful. When you dare to show your wounds with acceptance, others start to heal too. It was as if his sincerity broke a chain of collective silence. Jung said, The encounter with oneself transforms those around you. Elias was proving it. It was no longer just about closing a wound, but opening a new path. A path where pain is not the enemy, but a guide. Where the past ceases to be a prison and becomes a bridge. where the wounded child no longer needs to hide but can play, live, create, love. And finally, breathe. Elias's story perfectly reflects how Jung's teachings come alive when someone dares to look inward. His process was neither linear nor glamorous. It was human, vulnerable, chaotic at times, but also deeply authentic. And from that emotional chaos, light began to emerge, because as Jung taught, there is no awakening of consciousness without pain. The first essential element in Elias's process was the overwhelming emotional symptom, his crisis at work. We often think we're unwell because something external is wrong, but the external only activates what's already wounded inside. Elias didn't collapse because of the boss's reprimand. He collapsed because that injustice triggered an old emotional memory, the abandonment, invisibility, the feeling of being a child unable to defend himself. The paralysis he felt in that moment is highly significant from a Jungian perspective. Jung spoke of the complex eruption when a current event triggers a set of unconscious emotions, images, and repressed beliefs. Elias didn't respond as a 37-year-old adult. He responded as the confused child still living inside him. This is common when childhood wounds have not been integrated. Going to therapy was the start of the journey back to himself. Jung said that knowing oneself is one of the hardest tasks because it demands courage to see what we have avoided for years. His therapist didn't offer magical solutions, but deep questions, inviting him to feel rather than understand, and that's where the true therapeutic process begins. The key question: when did you stop crying? This question is not just poetic, it's diagnostic. Many people stop crying not because they healed, but because they learned to emotionally numb themselves. This internal cut marks the start of emotional disconnection, and when we disconnect from pain, we also distance ourselves from pleasure, true love, and genuine joy. Reconnecting with childhood was essential in Elias's therapy. Jung affirmed that inside every adult lives a child who holds the purest sense of who we are. Healing isn't about becoming a child again, it's about rescuing that child from emotional abandonment. Elias did this by writing to her, visualizing her, dreaming of her, giving her emotional space in the present. His dreams were another key element. Jung considered dreams the direct language of the unconscious. The forest, the darkness, the fleeing child are universal symbols. They represent the shadow, what has yet to be integrated, what remains on the margins, waiting to be embraced. The evolution of Elias's dreams, from the child running away to the child walking beside him, was a clear sign his unconscious was beginning to heal. The letter he wrote to his inner child was a deeply reparative act. In psychotherapy, this exercise is called internal reparenting dialogue. It breaks the silence imposed in childhood and begins offering the child what she never had: presence, listening, unconditional love. It's not about writing well, but about speaking from the soul. The small changes in Elias's daily life prove that healing doesn't happen only in grand moments, but in details: saying no, allowing rest, keeping company, stopping the rush. Jung spoke of individuation as a slow, progressive, and deeply intimate path. Every daily decision honoring your inner truth is a step toward integration. Elias began inhabiting his own body, bought a soft blanket, touched his own chest, embraced himself. These seemingly small gestures have an immense impact on the nervous system and unconscious. The body holds emotions never processed, and when we start to inhabit it with tenderness, something inside us stops living in a state of alert. Elias's relapses were completely natural. Healing isn't climbing a straight staircase, it's moving along a spiral. There are days of progress and days of return. The key is not to judge yourself. That's why Jung taught that the shadow returns. The shadow returns cyclically to be integrated at new levels of consciousness. This means that the healing process is neither linear nor final, but a constant and profound movement unfolding in spirals. When you feel like you are regressing, that the pain has returned, don't judge yourself as a failure or weakness. In truth, this return of pain signals that you are deepening your connection with your emotions, allowing yourself to feel what you once avoided or repressed. Jung reminds us that fleeing from pain only pushes it into the unconscious, where it silently continues to influence our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. Elias's encounter with his mother marked a decisive moment, not because of an explicit apology, something we often expect as a condition for healing. In fact, Elias realized that true forgiveness doesn't depend on the other person, but is born within us as an act of self-love and liberation. Jung taught that forgiveness is an internal process, a decision to release identification with pain and the victim role, even if the past remains unchanged. This inner forgiveness generates autonomous peace, independent of external reparations or recognition. It is an act of power and freedom where one takes control of their own story. In Elias's emotional life, this shift also reflected in his ability to relate more maturely and authentically. He stopped seeking people to save him or whom he could save, a common pattern among those who carry childhood wounds that force them into excessive responsibilities or emotional dependencies. Instead, he opened himself to vulnerability, showing who he really was, without masks or forced adaptations. Jung pointed out that this is the moment when the ego loses its tyranny and the self. The integrated wholeness of the person begins to guide choices and relationships. Loving from inner truth, not from emptiness or lack, is a sign of emotional maturity and deep self-connection. Chance, or perhaps destiny, placed in his hands a fundamental book for this process, Man and His Symbols, by Carl Jung. Jung taught that when the soul is ready, symbols come to us unexpectedly, through books, people, or situations that resonate with our life moment. For Elias, that page about loneliness and the difficulty of communicating what truly matters was a mirror reflecting his own inner transformation. The therapeutic journey, therefore, was not confined to the office, but took place in every small moment when he encountered something, speaking directly to his soul, in every word naming his process, in every sign inviting him to continue on the path. His journal became a sacred space where he could pour out his emotions without fear of judgment. Jung recommended writing as a powerful integration tool, because expressing feelings freely, without censorship, builds a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. In this process, Elias not only recorded his pain, progress, and setbacks, but also gave himself existence, recognizing and validating himself as someone worthy of care and love. For him, healing was not about changing the past, which is impossible, but about re-signifying it, giving new meaning to what was once a source of suffering. This inner transformation is well expressed in a Jungian phrase Elias began to carry as a mantra. What you deny enslaves you. What you accept transforms you. Recognizing and embracing wounded parts does not mean passively accepting pain, but giving it the space it needs to be expressed and dissolve. This process is difficult and demands courage, because confronting our wounds often awakens fears, insecurities, and the temptation to retreat. But it is also the only true path to liberation. The shadow, once an unknown and frightening enemy, then becomes a powerful ally. It carries our fears, pains, and rejections, but is also a source of hidden strength and wisdom. Elias understood that the relapses he experienced were not failures, but natural phases in the spiral of healing. Each time pain reappeared, he could remind himself that he was deepening his self-knowledge process, allowing himself to feel without fleeing or self-punishment. Allowing himself this vulnerability, Elias began to inhabit his body in a new way. Simple gestures, hugging himself with a soft blanket, placing his hand on his chest, and repeating to his inner child, "I'm with you, little Elias," had a profound impact on his nervous system and self-connection. Jung already taught that the body stores unprocessed emotions, and that restoring this connection is fundamental to emotional healing. Finally, Elias understood that true healing is not about always being well, but about being whole, accepting all your moments of strength and fragility, light and shadow. This balance is what makes him more human and paradoxically stronger. Thank you for allowing us to enter your heart. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for letting us walk alongside you on this deep journey of self-discovery, healing, and transformation. Now, I want to invite you to do something that may seem simple but holds incredible power. Scroll down to the comments and write the following phrase with all your sincerity and strength. Today, I begin to heal from love, no longer from the wound. Don't write it for me. Don't write it for anyone else. Write it for yourself to mark this moment in your life when you decided to look within with courage, honesty, and compassion. Remember, healing is not a destination. It's a path built day by day with small but profound steps. And this decision to begin healing from the inside out is what can transform everything. If this content resonated with you, if any word touched your heart or opened a space for reflection, I invite you to subscribe to the channel Unshakable Mind. Here you will find more messages that reach the core, that bring light to the dark corners of the soul, and that strengthen your journey toward a more authentic, free, and conscious life. The path of transformation is not always easy. It often requires facing shadows, accepting vulnerability, and letting go of old patterns. But know that you are not alone. Every step you take toward your authenticity is an act of courage. And here on Unshakable Mind, we walk together, empowering one another. Don't rush. Allow yourself to feel, fall, rise, and start over. True change happens when we embrace ourselves whole with all our pain and all our light. Embrace your inner child with tenderness. Recognize your scars as maps of where you have been and bridges to where you can go. And always remember, you are worthy of love. You are enough, and your process matters. Thank you for being here, for being part of this community that chooses healing amid chaos. We are in this journey together, step by step, heart to heart. If you liked this video, leave a like, share it with those who need to hear this message, and of course, write your commitment phrase in the comments below. Your voice can inspire and strengthen others who are also seeking the light. See you in the next video. May your journey be full of peace, courage, and love.